Hey, Scott from MyGrowthRings.com here once again is in my home shop, and today we are going to get this jointer done. Last weekend, I stripped all of the rust off of this using a couple products to do that, including, and really most importantly, WD-40 and Scotch-Brite to get this thing nice and polished. The midweek episode of Stump, the follow-up to that, was supposed to be applying a polyurethane to this, which is what I had planned on doing, except for the fact that it rained all week long here in North Carolina. So thank goodness it has stopped raining, although there's a little bit of rain predicted later this afternoon. But the bigger problem today is we are under a freeze warning. So for the last couple hours, sitting beneath the jointer here has been one of these oil-filled heaters, just keeping it warm. And I'm going to leave that there and leave it on as the finishes cure. So let's talk about the finishes I'm planning on using. And a great comment somebody asked. Let's start from there. Right now it has WD-40 on it, which has been keeping it from rusting this week. And I said that I would be using paint thinner to remove that. So that's mineral spirits. A couple comments were, well, isn't the mineral spirits going to interact with if you use paste wax? Or would the mineral spirits create a problem with using the polyurethane that I'm planning on using? No, both the Johnson paste wax and the oil-based polyurethane that I had originally planned on applying have a mineral spirits base. So not a problem putting paste wax or this over it. However, after some comments, I decided, okay, let's do a test. I'm going to use some water-based polyurethane as well as oil-based polyurethane. But then another question came up, and that was, or a recommendation, hey, Scott, have you tried Penetrol? Well, years ago, back in the 80s, maybe, if it's that old, I knew this as a additive to paint, but had never heard about it being used on bare metal. So after that recommendation, I went down a rabbit hole on on Google as well as on YouTube and found out, sure enough, people are using that on bare metal. So because I don't know what the long-term qualities of that are going to be, I'm going to go ahead and use that on the fence. And that way, if I wind up having to strip it off at some point, it doesn't matter. But I don't want to put it here on the bed. So the one thought was, well, I could put the oil base on one side and I could put the water base on the other. Well, that's not a true test because you start with rough wood on the infeed table and then you wind up with smooth jointed lumber on the outfeed. Okay, well, what if we divide it down the middle this way? Well, the problem with that is I do most of my jointing on this half, the forward half of the jointer, and I leave the back half of the jointer for jointing things I shouldn't be jointing. Um, Occasionally, a piece of plywood if I just really feel like I need to. Something that might just have some hardware in it, and I try not to work with lumber that's like that, but every now and again it does. I do. So I'll slide the fence all the way to the back, and that back side is sacrificial to me. I do that because if I want to do any face joining or rabbiting, I need a fair amount of the blade unnicked, undamaged, unworn, and so I leave that on this end where the rabbiting ledge is. Now we'll do a video or two on the use of the jointer, and we'll talk about how all that is done. But just understand that splitting it in half this direction is not going to give us a test of even wear. So what I'm going to do, we're going to strip this down to bare metal. I'm going to put a strip of tape here across the center, here across the center. We'll do oil base, water base, oil base, water base. And then after I remove the tape, we'll have a 1-inch strip that is bare metal. And so there we will test a couple different finishes, such as waxes. I've mentioned I like to use Bow Shield, which is a spray-on. There's another spray-on lubricant that works really well. We'll talk about that maybe in a later video. So we'll be testing a number of different products. I don't use this jointer enough to say that in a month from now we'll have a definitive answer, but I'm just curious about how all these things hold up. So that's where we're heading today. All right, so it's applied. We got to give it a couple days to cure, and by our midweek episode, we'll be ready to apply some wax on this, and then we'll use the jointer finally. So be sure to follow up on that. Now, one quick tip: um, I have water base, oil base, water base, oil base, and over here the Penetrol on the fence. Having now used Penetrol for the first time, I can tell you it smells like boiled linseed oil. And if that is what is in fact in here, we got to be careful of spontaneous combustion. I have on 2 occasions using Danish oil, which has a lot of boiled linseed oil in it, as well as solvents. On 2 occasions, I've had fires. One was in a trash can, and one was in a dumpster. And so we've learned that you want to take whatever you're using, whatever rag you're using, and lay it out over something to dry. I'll usually find a piece of scrap wood or something to drape this across. And then once it's fully dried and everything is cured, you can throw it in the trash, no problem at all. But while this is still wet, you do run that risk. So be careful with it. All right. So follow up with me midweek episode of Stumped Q&A. Leave your questions, comments, and cheap shots here, and we'll get to them then. All right. Make it a great week.